Welcome into the Sports Objective, the unofficial podcast of the Pirates. With us right now, Bubba Rosenbaum. What's up, dude?
How's it going? Really looking forward to tonight's show on talking football with Double B, and then also Chris Hughes of Carolina Preps.
I tell you what, if there's ever been a prima donna, it's Kyle from LaGrange. I literally had like 2 seconds to punch you up. And Brian Bailey, TV knows about. I literally had a couple seconds to punch you up. What's up, dude? I guess he was in his dressing room and finally got. Were you in your dressing room and come on the set now?
Or you asking Brian? Who you talking to?
I'm talking to you.
Actually, I was changing my shirt. It's funny you say that.
All right. With us right now, one of my dear friends from a long time. Hard to believe I've known him for 24 years. The sports director for WNCT, Channel 9 in Greenville. Brian Bailey, how are you, Double B?
Very good. How's everything?
Very excited to have you on. I'm hoping, since I'm seeing your face, and obviously people listen to the podcast will hear your voice, I'm hoping that means that we've got sports coming up, at least with we'll talk about later in the interview with you about high school football, which that's a disappointment, but at least we have that in the spring. But as far as college football, I'm hoping that seeing you tonight that we'll have September 12th, we'll be able to have the kickoff against Marshall Dowdy-Ficklin Stadium.
Yeah, the way it goes right now is that every day that you get closer, that's one little inch closer to possibly having football. We all know that it's still a possibility that we won't have football, but right now all systems are go, and you just hold your breath and hope that nothing big happens with the COVID. Chapel Hill, when they sent the students with online only classes starting tomorrow, and then Mac Brown had some great comments today, and really he thinks it's going to help his football program because everybody's gone. So I mean, it's kind of, and all the sports shows today have been debating, is that the right way to do it and that kind of thing. But Coach Brown said a lot of his student athletes were all doing online classes anyway. So he said it wasn't that big a deal.
No, and you're right. They're more isolated without the undergrads there. And UNC has, I guess, probably the biggest graduate program in the state. So there's still a lot of people on campus. But I kind of agree with Mac, and I hate to say that, but it kind of isolates the kids more. The less people that are around them, the better.
Yeah, Coach Houston may want to see that.
Yeah. Well, Brian, one of the things I asked Coach about the press conference just a little bit ago was the very fact of he's got to be proud of the way his team has conducted themselves with you look at East Carolina. I know that with the Chancellor and with Greenville and ECU, they've worked really hard to shut down these big parties. As soon as they have a big party and they find out about it, they go there and shut it down in hopes that they'll be able to keep the numbers of COVID from spreading.
Yeah, and that was one of the big questions. We joked about it, and we said, what are you going to do when Susie comes to town and wants to go out with one of the football players? I mean, that's got to be one of the big questions on everybody's mind. I mean, those guys are 19, 20, 21 years old. We all know what it was like to be that age, and these guys are good looking. They're not like us. I mean, they're good looking guys.
Brian, I'm 39 and I'm still like that. What are you talking about?
There you go. I mean, so it's one of those things that it's inevitable that young people are going to get together. And as Coach Houston said a couple of times, we've got to protect our season. And that's what he's preached the whole time. We've got to do the right things. We've got to protect our season. And I think that's how they looked at it. And I think, knock on wood, that so far so good.
Can we swab their girlfriend?
Yeah, I don't know. And all that contact tracing, how are we going to find all that out? Susie's wandering around there somewhere, I can tell you.
That's too much math and too much trying to. Oh man, my brain hurts to think about that. I want to get your opinion, obviously being for those that don't know, because it feels like you are ECU grad, being an ODU grad. What did you think about the football team not having a football season? That's got to be kind of odd, don't you think?
Yeah, exactly. I just don't think that everybody throwing the towel in, like the Big Ten and the Pac-12, and you don't know how much of that is political. And now you see the Big Ten parents have gotten together and they've got all these letters. You've got this petition that's out there, and it's just one big battle. We were talking today about the Heisman Trophy. If everybody plays that's supposed to play, and everybody play, the other team, schools play in the spring, are you going to have a Heisman Trophy in December? Or do you have to wait till the spring? I mean, there's so many questions about everything, and I don't know how spring football is really going to work. I did hear a plan. The Big Ten's talking about kicking off on New Year's Day in domes all around the Midwest, which I think is very intriguing if they can pull that off. But I just don't know how much safer it is for those guys on January 1st to play as it is in September 12th.
It's not. Your vaccine's just going to start coming out, and if everything goes right in late January. So that doesn't make any sense at all. You talk about how things are going to work and how things will look. One thing we talked about on here was bowl games. You have 42 bowl games. That's 84 teams. As we sit today, 76 teams are playing college football. So, how's that going to work? How many bowl games will be played this December and January? Will we have bowl games? Will 5 and 5 get you bowl eligible if you play 10 games?
Right. I mean, those are questions that got to be answered. Will they have bowl games? Will fans be allowed to go? They won't bring them in if the fans can't go. So we just got to get through 2020 somehow and have a normal year. And you hate that for the student athletes because, as I've always said, when I coached, back when my daughter was playing, our son was playing, I always would tell them, you only go through it once. That's all you get. You get one shot at this thing. And these guys aren't even getting a real shot in some respects. And the seniors last year in high school lost their spring seasons. The football players now trying to play in the spring, 7 games only. North Carolina High School Athletic Association kind of reduced all their sports in their schedules. So, nobody gets a normal year.
Brian, your best friend Mike Hamrick announced today that Marshall would be opening up the season September 5th against Eastern Kentucky up in Huntington. So they're playing an FCS opponent the week before they play the Pirates. Bub asked Coach Houston post-practice today if he would like to see East Carolina do the same. And without saying he would like the same, he said he would like the same. Do you think there's any way we add an FCS opponent? I know Campbell is going to play 4 games. They've got 2 scheduled so far with Georgia Southern and App State, for example. Do you think there's any way at this point that we try to schedule an FCS September 5th now that Marshall has? Obviously, it would be with no fans because there's no chance of going into phase 3 before September 12th.
Right. Yeah, it'd be with no fans. But, it's got to be a possibility. But you think about, one of the things they've talked about, one of the reasons they moved to the 12th is because there hasn't been any staff, on campus in the athletic department all summer. And they've got a lot of work to do to get ready for, college football at Dowdy-Ficklen Stadium. So I don't know if that extra week would help them, to staff everything, if they could get it all done by the 5th. I'd like to see it. I think Coach Houston would love to see it.
Maybe look at it the other way. If you know you're not going to have any fans on the 5th, look at that as a test run before you maybe you get a 30% capacity on the 12th.
Yeah. So, I think that would be big for the program. But somebody better tell Coach Houston if he's playing on the 5th. Because right now he's planning on playing on the 12th.
Yeah, it sounds like he would like it, but that needs to be done as soon as possible if we're going to do it.
Yeah, I agree. You got to get that thing if you're going to do it. But I think it's going to be a great advantage for Marshall because you get a chance to play a game, and that's just football 101. If you get a chance to play a game, you iron out some things. The old cliche is that coaches say that you're always, you show your most improvement from game 1 to game 2. And without any spring practice, and all you get is the scrimmages, this summer. So, yeah, I'd love to see a game on the 5th.
Yeah.
Now, Brian, we have some comments and questions from our viewers. Josh Smith, former East Carolina defensive lineman, chiming in. He said, "Barbershops are open, BB."
What do you think? I need a haircut?
And then also Richard Alsbrook said, do you see ECU and the AAC potentially taking some of the Pac-12 and Big Ten canceled television slots?
I think that's a real possibility. If this thing goes as we hope and they get the chance to play, there's going to be some open slots. And we've talked about it a couple of times that this may be the biggest thing that the American Athletic Conference, could have happen. I think the American, if everything is as safe as we hope that it is, the American has to take advantage of this. And if they could get a team like a UCF, USF, and East Carolina, somebody to really have a great year, and they can make some noise. I don't know if they could get into the playoff, but this would be their best chance.
Yeah, that's a good question. If you take a UCF or Cincinnati, for example, and they go undefeated, would this be the year that they got in the playoffs? If it wasn't this year, you got to wonder if it would ever happen. Well, I joked with, who was I talking to? I don't even remember who I was talking to. It may have been Morgan Ehlers. I said, I can see right now they were talking about the playoffs. Are we going to take an 8-4 Auburn or a 12-0 UCF?
Yeah, you're right, and that's the shame. The American working on the Power Six narrative. They've tried to instill that. The thing about the American, they're the best of the group of five, no doubt, but they just can't get into that Power Five moniker, and that's what they would dearly love to do. And and there's so many teams in all the conferences that really don't deserve to be Power Five and to get all the money that they get. And the Cincinnati's and the USFs, the UCFs, the East Carolinas. I mean, there's some schools that really deserve to get into some of that deal. Especially, UCF has had an amazing run, and just the things that they've accomplished. And it's disheartening when you look at it as far as the conference is concerned. But Mike Oresco does a really good job as the commissioner, and I think he'll guide this league. And I think they've got the best man in charge.
Speaking of the league, Temple came out, and their athletic director, I can't think of Temple's AD's name right now, said yesterday they may stick with just a conference-only schedule. They've lost all 4 of their non-conference games, and the city of Philadelphia has already told them no fans. So they said they may not start playing until September 26th and just do a conference-only schedule. Doesn't seem like, in my opinion, that the conference should allow that. I mean, that could be an advantage or a disadvantage. You take them not playing any games, get into conference play. By the time, September 26th rolls around, everybody else is going to play at least 2 games. You could have some big advantages early on with everybody being healthy, and you could have a bunch of guys already out for injuries and COVID-related issues for other teams. Yeah,
but the other side of it is, as we talked about, the advantage of playing that September 5th date. If you get 2 games under your belt, and one of them is a non-conference game, and then you get a chance to play. So I think that I think not playing any non-conference games is a bigger disadvantage than it would be an advantage.
No, you got a good point.
Yeah.
Another interesting nugget from Coach Houston's post-practice press conference today, Stephen Igo had a question piggybacking off of something that Donnie Kirkpatrick had alluded to in your interview with him yesterday, and that was the COVID-related issues with the offensive line and how that's allowed Coach Shank and company to build some depth there. So what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and that's going to be key. I mean, we all know that we looked at the championships in Conference USA for East Carolina, and that was the defensive line was so good. The offensive line has to be good for Holton to have time. If you give him time, he can pick you apart. And I think, and Holton's the type of leader, and he loves those guys. And if they can build some depth, which it sounds like they are, and Coach Shankweiler obviously is one of the best in the business. I mean, we've watched him through his 4th stint at East Carolina, and I've been through all 4 of them with him. I mean, it's like a yo-yo. He keeps coming back, but he's one of the best. I mean, he's so good at what he does, and he loves the idea of coaching those kids and teaching those kids, and it's a good match as far as that goes for Coach Houston.
Brian, despite all the issues with COVID and et cetera, are you getting the same sense that I am? This coaching staff seems to have a lot more confidence in this team than they did last year's.
Oh, no doubt. And talking to Donnie, I even asked Donnie, I think I did ask him on the air. I said, I know you're on the offensive side of the football, but how good is this defense this year? How much improvement have you seen? And he said it's unbelievable that they run so much better, that they're stronger. He said they seem to really like one another. That's the one thing that you hear a lot of, that the whole team likes one another. But, defensively, if they could have just slowed down like SMU last year and in some other games, they could have had a couple more wins. And I think that's what really gets at Donnie and some of those guys. As Donnie said, we didn't sign up for 4 wins. That's not what we're about. And that's all they were able to get last year. So I think that they'll be fired. It's just an odd thing, though. We shouldn't be talking about if we play. We should be talking about the game is this date, and they're going to play this date. But we can't say that.
I think Ron, me and Bubba were talking about this yesterday. It had it stayed scheduled for the 29th, and there was no COVID. We'd literally be saying we're going to play next weekend.
Right, and that's high school football was supposed to start coming up this Friday night. I mean, this is the time of year that I joke with my wife and my family. We used to go on a vacation in late July, early August, and then we crank it up. And I mean, this week is one of those. I go in early to work on graphics and work on different things with Touchdown Friday, and I get nervous. I get nervous every time for the first show. It's like 35, 36 years in, I still get scared to death for that first show because you don't know. every year in high school football with our show, we have new people coming in. And they don't know what it's like. You can't explain it to anybody. You can show them last year's show, but it only gives them a taste of it. And then, but after the first show, usually it goes pretty well, and then we get better and better from there.
Bailey, what's it like to have people my age, 39 years old, saying they watched I feel like a Pepsi Touchdown Friday as a kid growing up and have watched you since I was a kid. It's gonna make you feel really old.
Well, it's funny because I've had gray hair for a long time, and I think a lot of people think I'm like 80 now. So I'm only 58, but I got here when I was 21, 22. So I was really young when I got here and started, and my goal was to go to Raleigh or go to Greensboro, go to Charlotte, and I just started raising a family and fell in love with this place, and just never really. I think I've applied to two jobs over the last 36 years, and I think I was in the top 3, both of them, but I didn't get either one of them, and wasn't that big a deal when it turned out.
Brian, if Coach Hughes gets us back to a bowl this year, if there is bowl games, will you grow your mustache back?
The mustache.
I grow it back for Mustache March with Cliff Godwin and those guys, and I hate it. Because I tried to do a goatee, I tried to do all kinds of different things. One year I colored it. That was the craziest thing. I colored it brown, so I had white hair with a brown goatee. And my people at the station were too nice to tell me that. Look, that looks terrible, but it did. It looked god awful. But it was fun to do, and Coach Godwin and those guys do such a good job with the ALS. I do a lot of stuff with the ALS Walk in Town. I've emceed that the last 15 years or so, and that's Mustache March is cool because I never thought I would grow it back. I told the guys at the Peach Bowl I would never grow it back, but they wanted to shave my head that year. I had to talk them into the mustache.
Brian, that had to be weird for all of us. I know that when that whole thing was going down, when we start the baseball season, speaking of Cliff Godwin, and I know it seems like I was telling you 2 or 3 years, it seems like instead of a handful of months since that time. But I know that had to be hard on Coach Godwin as a competitor. It was really hard for members of the media and the fans because you're like so used to baseball season with the talent that was coming back. That certainly had, I feel like, was at least a super regional team. And to lose, those games, and then those guys, some of the guys, going to the draft, like Burley, for example, I know that's got to be killing him. What could have been?
Yeah, and I think after a while, you kind of look through it, and you start building to the next year. But that week, I'll never forget that week because they were on the road at UNC Wilmington, and on the way to Wilmington, they got word that the Ivy League had canceled all their spring sports, and I think it was Columbia was coming to town for a 3-game series. So then Coach Godwin was on the phone trying to find somebody to come play 3 games. Well, UNCW game that night. So he was busy trying to do that. And, I think that was on a Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. That Thursday mornings when I went to the ACC tournament, and I got there about, 10:45 a.m. They had just announced they were definitely playing on that Thursday. And then by noon, they had canceled. It was a scary, scary time. And it was really surreal was what it was.
No doubt about it. Hey, Bubba, I know with our good friend and yours too, Brian Bailey, Cy Seymour, we were trying to get him right before the American tournament. And I know that there was some with scheduling and some flights or something that the scheduling just didn't work out. And then he sent Bubba some pictures of how surreal that was down there in Fort Worth of that court and no fans. It was just bizarre. And then right as they thought they were going to play the tournament, right before the tournament started, I guess the ADs got together along with the commissioner, and next thing you know, that one's gone. It's just like and then I know that Coach K has said with Mark Packer, and recently again, I read again today that we've got I want to get your thoughts on this. He's like talking about, hey, we've got to have March Madness for the NCAA with all the money that financially, how much that brings in it.
Yeah, and I've read some stories saying that they may try to have the tournament in a bubble somewhere, which I don't know how that would work. I mean, these are student athletes. How are you going to, take them away for a whole month? But, you just got to hope that this thing goes away forever at some point. I really miss that. That's one of the things, as a sports fan, we were cheated out of the March Madness and how much fun that is every year. And just opening day of baseball, and baseball is really weird. You watch Fox and they got all these virtual fans in the stands, and then they hit a foul ball and they're all gone. I mean, it's just wild to me. And the NBA, I just noticed some of their fans today. I thought they were real people for a while, but they're all virtual as well, and it's a virtual world right now, I guess.
No doubt about it. What about in the NFL with your Cowboys? You think we're going to have an NFL season?
I think so. I think that's our best chance. And I'm really encouraged still about college football that we've got a chance, to still have it. I think the pros is a better chance. And I think if we don't have college football, I think the NFL is going to move some games to Saturdays and maybe even Friday nights. I think they're going to bounce around some games, and there'll be plenty to keep an eye on. I mean, it's going to be really weird because I think I'm going insane anyway. And then all of a sudden you're going to have the Masters in November, and you're going to have this is going to go on. You're not going to know what season it is. We got high school football in February. Are you kidding me? But
are you going to do this on Friday in February?
We don't know yet. We've got a Zoom in the morning. We're going to talk about some plans for high school sports in general. And then we're gonna try it. If it's only a 7-week schedule, I think a lot of it depends on the playoffs, if they have playoffs. If they have a postseason like they normally do, then that would give us 9 or 10 weeks, to do a show. We do a half an hour show, which is longer than anybody else does. And one of the segments that we have in that show is usually an East Carolina preview, an ACC preview. We wouldn't have that in the spring. We could do a Big Ten preview if they end up playing in the spring. But
look ahead to the weekend in Pirate baseball.
Right, and that's we try to orient it towards football because it's touchdown Friday. But we could. That's one of the things we could talk baseball. We could talk, because if it's a Friday night, then game one of the series, if they do things like they have been, I've heard even rumors they may go to Saturday doubleheaders and one game Sunday and get the teams out. So I think there's so much up in the air still that we just don't know what we're going to see.
That's one interesting thing. That very thing. It's the very fact I thought about yesterday. The very fact I never thought in a million years that high school football would be. My birthday is April 14th, so we could potentially be playing high school football on my birthday.
And you know how March is. I mean, March is a horrible weather month usually. I mean, in like a lion, out like a lamb, or vice versa. But late February to start practice. I mean, those boys. They're going to be working out in January and February, getting ready for a season. They're used to summer heat. It's going to be summer blizzard.
I will give them credit with North Carolina High School Athletic Association, or whatever the hell it's called. They did come out with a schedule all at one time saying, this is when we're playing football, this is when we're playing basketball, this is when we're playing baseball. And it was organized, and it was a set period all at one time, so there was no questions. So I do give them credit for that.
Well, I give them credit for that. I just think, I was hoping they would play in the fall, because if you're going to send them back to school, so many of these guys, I mean, that's what they live for. They live, and that's just a fact. They go to school and they work as hard as they can so they can go out on the athletic field, and it's just part of high school life. Now these seniors are walking around on, Thursday's supposed to be, your walk-through day, and then Friday you wear your jersey to school, and cheerleaders have their cheerleading uniforms on. Everybody's fired up for the game that night, and you won't see it. Maybe you'll see it in the spring. Maybe it'll have the same type flair. I just don't think it will, because the fall is so very special. I did find some Oktoberfest today at Sam's Club, so the COVID did not get the Oktoberfest, and that's a good thing.
Indeed. Hey, speaking of guys living their life, for football, if you're a student athlete, Jay Sunhalter, former East Carolina tight end, and he does some work for ESPN now. He flat out said if this would have happened when he was a student athlete and they said no football, he'd have lost his eligibility because he wouldn't have went to class.
Right. I mean, so many things like that, and that's what I think it was one of the coaches last week said. Now, we really got to concentrate on keeping them eligible, because if they're not eligible after the first semester, they can't play in that second semester. So I think that's going to be another thing that's another headache for the high school coaches. And I just don't understand how South Carolina can play. I think they're playing normal, right? They're still going into fall.
In Georgia is still, Brian.
I know some school. I think it has largely to do with R's and D's.
Yeah, I agree, and it's a shame, but that's what it's come down to, and let's see what happens.
Bubba, you wanted to ask Brian a question about his Cubbies?
I I was going to make the point, and just they're off to an excellent start, 14-7, a little over a third of the way through the shortened season. So just getting your thoughts there. I know I saw some things, social media and otherwise, as far as the rooftop tickets going for about $350 or something.
I haven't seen how much they're going for, but I know that I've seen some of the videos, those guys up there. And I think Mark Grace was talking. I watched most of the Cub games on the MLB ticket thing, and he was talking about that he went to a game up there, and he said you can't see anything, but you have a good time.
That sounds like, hey Brian, that sounds like the jungle, and that's something, Brian, you and Kyle have in common. You are both Cubs fans, so
good. Yeah, I love watching the Cubs. I fell in love with them when I was in college. I was at Old Dominion commuting back and forth, so I lived at home. I would come home in the afternoon, do my homework, and watch Harry Carey and the Cubs. And
WGN, yeah.
Remember Jody? Man, he'd sing about Jody Davis. Jody Davis. It was Harry was the best, man. I met him in Philadelphia. In Philadelphia. Yeah, the story goes like this. I went up to him, and he was standing there, and I introduced myself, and I said, I'm a sportscaster in Greenville, North Carolina. And he said, Greenville, North Carolina. He said, my grandson Chip, he's a sportscaster in Greenville. And I said, no, he's a sportscaster in Greensboro. And he goes, Greensboro? What'd you say? I said Greenville. He said, Greenville, Greensboro. What the hell's the difference? You got a point. I said, on my check, probably a 0, because Greensboro's a little bigger than Greenville. But yeah, that was fun meeting him, and I got a picture taken with him, and then I sent the picture to WGN, and he signed it for me and sent it back. That was really cool.
Yeah, I grew up late '80s, early '90s watching. I hated the Braves. Everybody, TBS, and the reason I hated the Braves, they'd come on WTBS, and everybody else was Braves fan, is because lots of times they would interrupt Saturday Night Wrestling, NWA at the time, then it became WCW, and it would piss me off. So, I hated the Braves, and summer afternoons, nothing else to do. You turn on WGN during the day because they played all their games during the day at that time, and watch Cub baseball and Ryan Sandberg and Mark Grace and hear Harry Carey call the games, and it was just, even though they didn't win as much as the Braves did early '90s, I fell in love with them.
I love Ryan Sandberg. I met him at the All-Star game in '93 in Baltimore, and I told him at the time that we had named my son after him, Ryan, R-Y-N-E. Coach Gary Overton is the one that had that idea. We were at a banquet, and my wife at the time, we were talking about names, and we were going to go with Kyle, oddly enough. And Coach O said, Brian, what about a name like Ryan? You could call him Rhino, and what a great name. And I said, there's no way that's going to work. And my wife at the time said, I think that's a good idea. So we ran with it, and so he's named after Ryan Sandberg.
Bubba Rosenbaum there, our co-host, named his son after Lincoln Riley.
Oh, really? That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, my son's name is Riley, but I get that question all the time. It was just the name we liked. My last name's Rosenbaum. It was not after Coach Riley, even though I was certainly a big fan of Lincoln.
And that's what he told his wife, Stacy, and he's still going with the story, Brian.
Yeah, that's a great story.
You're call Lincoln and tell him maybe he'll send you some Oklahoma gear.
Oh my God! I tell you one day there. Good stuff. He's done all right, don't you think, Brian? After Greenville,
you think about his, just rise to the top. It was so fast. I mean, it was unbelievable. He's making what, $200,000 a year as the offensive coordinator of East Carolina, and he bumps up. Then he goes to Oklahoma. He's making, I guess, as offensive coordinator.
$6 million.
I think as offensive coordinator, he started there was right about $1 million, wasn't it? Right about.
Yeah.
He's up to what?
Then
6 or something.
Then he went from that to, when they hired him as the head coach, went to 3, and then with the recent success he's had, he's gone up to $6 million. I mean, that's an incredible number for sure.
It's crazy.
We'll have to see how everything plays out. And Brian, before we let you go, I'm praying that we can, next time we have you on, we can talk more about college football and definitely the NFL, and certainly right now it's looking good, but I don't want to jinx it.
Yeah, I don't want to jinx it either. And I think, as I said, every day that we get closer, I think that's another inch, and we got to just inch our way forward. But I think if we get to the 1st of September, you got to think that it's on. You got to hope. unless something just crazy happens. But I think the ACC and the SEC, pretty adamant they're going to. I think the SEC will play come hell or high water. They're going to play football in the SEC.
I'll tell you what, the ACC plays we have to play. And I actually did, Dave, I had one more question for Brian. It was a follow-up to the Lincoln Riley talk at Oklahoma. Got us on Lincoln staff, Shane Beamer. I remember, if I remember correctly, I was listening to your show, and I want to say you said Shane reached out to us, and you had a conversation with him, and us meaning East Carolina, when we unfortunately fired Ruffin, and before we hired Scotty, and Confer basically didn't return his phone call. He's now at Oklahoma. He's got a great coaching pedigree. Why do you think I guess you're trying to get into the operation of Jeff Confer's mind, so good luck. But why do you think there was no interest in talking to Shane?
Yeah, I don't know. And I know that I reached out to Shane. I was on my anniversary trip. We were in Boone, or one of those out in the western part of the state. We were out there, and it was a weekend, and we got there on Friday night, and he had called me back about 5:00. So I'm on this, this anniversary weekend. I'm still answering the phone, but he was so nice and talked to him, and he asked me, if he had a shot, and I said, well, we've been throwing your name out there because I think it's a great name to throw out there, but I don't think he ever got considered. And you just don't know when those searches go. You just can't really tell, what's going on, because a lot of times the ADs have hired, either hired people or they know people that they trust, and they're talking to those people more than they're talking to an individual coach. And how Scotty Montgomery got the job, is a mystery, really, because he was a late bloomer coming into the thing, and he never really bloomed when he got here.
Tony Collins answer to that question. Ask Tony; he'll tell you.
Yeah.
Well, Brian, man, thanks so much for the visit, and again, we appreciate you. And maybe I'll tell you one thing. I'll say this before we go: the Big Ten and the Pac-12 better hope that something does happen, because they're going to look like a bunch of fools.
Well, I know. I agree with that 100%. If the ACC and the SEC and the American everybody plays, and those parents are already fired up, and it's going to be a war for those, because it wouldn't surprise me if in a week maybe they revamp, because I think they're getting so much pressure. But that would be a real positive sign. But I don't think we're going to get
awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, enjoy the rest of whatever what you got left of your summer, and we'll talk to you again in maybe a few weeks.
Sounds good. You guys give me a call.
All right, definitely will. Appreciate you, Brian.
Friday.
That will be Brian Bailey here, WNCT Sports Director. And we're going to bring in now from NC Preps, one of our favorites too, especially when it comes to high school football in North Carolina. I know you can probably see us around the world. This guy eats, sleeps, drinks North Carolina football, and I'm sure he knows more than high school football, and probably a lot in the nation too. And let's bring in with us now from NC Preps, Chris Hughes. Chris, how are you, man? Let's see if we can get him. I guess he stepped away. We'll get him on.
Break, Dave. Don't bother the man.
All right, he'll come back in just a second, but certainly, guys, we were talking about the 7 games starting in February with North Carolina high school football, and interesting thing, there he is. Hey, Chris, how are you?
Sorry about that, guys.
That's all right. I like your hats.
Hey, cool hat. Sir.
We definitely let you on the show with that hat on. Wanted to have you on because obviously we've been wondering about high school football, and yours truly. When I get a chance, I'm on the radio doing high school football. So I'm wondering about recruiting, and obviously you follow it very, very close, coaching yourself. How has this been? I just want to ask you this out of the gate. How crazy of a year for a guy that loves high school football as much as you do? How crazy has it been?
Oh, man, it's been crazy. It's been driving me insane. And to be honest, making me look at maybe some other lines of work just to have something productive to do, because, when you live and breathe and work in the high school and the sporting industry in general for the last, 15, 20 years, this is like pulling teeth. It's nothing to do. And I feel so unproductive. And, it's not like there's things out there I could be doing. Maybe I could make up some busy work, but no, this is crazy. And, Friday night should be our opening game of the season. And here we are talking about February.
Yeah. How weird does it feel for you personally, knowing, like you said, Friday night we should be getting ready to start the high school football season? you're getting ready to look for, forward to the season ahead. And now you got to wait till February. I mean, it's just it feels like, I would imagine you feel like you're in another world.
Well, it really is. And the tough part about it is this was gearing up to be one of the best seasons, I think, in recent memory, with so many incredible teams, some big-time recruits. I mean, I talked to Mac Brown of the University of North Carolina yesterday because I've got him on a show I'm doing tomorrow. And, he said the talent in this state this year and next year is better than anything he's ever seen in his time in North Carolina and on par with Texas. And, we had some big-time games. And, Myers Park playing out-of-state games, Weddington and Vance, Dutch Fort coming up to play Vance. And now those games are going to be gone because in the shortened, condensed season in February, you're just most likely going to see all conference games with maybe one or two non-conference. I'm not sure the details yet because Q Tucker hadn't announced them yet.
Do you think you're going to have seniors? Sorry, Dave. Do you think you're going to have seniors that have already committed to sign? Because, I'm guessing if we go through with normal signing day, opt out on playing their senior year?
Well, Drake May at Myers Park has kind of hinted that he will play. He is committed to play at the University of North Carolina. So, he's one of the big guys that has said that he wants to play for his team and leave a legacy. And I think he has a chance to be the best quarterback we've seen in North Carolina, maybe if not all time, at least in that top 2 or 3. So if he plays, that will be a refreshing sign just to see someone commit to their high school team. But we've already heard that Power Eccles advance, that so many other guys have declared that they're just going to go and play their college, commit early, enroll in December, and go play college ball. And to be honest, I don't mind that. As a high school fan, I want to see them laced up and play it on the gridiron here in North Carolina. But their ultimate goal is to get there to the collegiate ranks. And if they've got that chance, who's to say they don't get an injury and lose it all? So I fully think that going is the best thing for them.
And Chris, that's one of the questions to follow up that what Kyle's talking about. That very thing is 2 questions. One is I would ask, do you see a whole bunch of guys doing that where they forego their senior season? Because the one thing that I'm worried about, my second part, I'm worried about the same thing for college. If we had to go to a spring schedule for college, I'm worried about, and because you coach and played and all that, I'm worried how many games can the body take for high school or college or anything for that matter in a calendar year?
Well, the first question is I do not think that a ton of players are going to go and forego their senior season and just enroll early into college. But I do think that a large majority of those top 2 or 3, 4 or 5-star kind of kids that we've got that have committed to North Carolina and Clemson, I think some of those guys will commit early. But I think far and wide, most of your senior athletes are going to play because, well, let's be honest. Yes, we talk about those big 2 or 3 percenters that are going to go to that next level, but most of your guys playing high school ball, the furthest they're going to go is high school, and a smaller amount's going to go D2 and D3 programs, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I think that you'll still see a lot of seniors playing, but I also think that some coaches, and I've had these conversations, are going to treat this spring season almost like like a regular spring college practice where you get those young guys up there and you give them a chance to play and really prepare for that 21 season. And the second part of your question kind of goes with that. I don't think playing in late February, March, early April is going to be too much of an issue because you're going to have a 4-month gap for these guys to heal up and get ready. Now, here's the caveat to that. I don't want to see these coaches in next summer just pounding these guys to death with 7-on-7s and working and stuff like that. I do think that you've got to have a certain amount of time to let these guys heal. But I don't think with a 4-month window, I don't think that's too much.
As far as Bubba, do you have a question for Chris?
I was just going to kind of piggyback off of what you guys were already discussing. As far as I saw today that Coach Saban, in his opinion, I thought the spring would be kind of like JV football in his estimation.
I could see that. And again, I think it kind of goes back to what I just said and what a lot of football coaches have told me, that they're going to use this spring season as a opportunity to probably play some sophomore and maybe even some freshmen up on a Friday night level that otherwise would have spent an entire season on JV. Because let's be real, you know, with some of those seniors moving on, and I have a feeling, I'm not for sure, but this is a hunch because I've coached kids for a long time. There's going to be some guys, probably some of those guys who are on the roster but aren't necessarily players, they're going to check out and say, hey, I don't want to practice in January and February. And to be honest, I don't blame them. So you're going to have some seniors, I think, that don't play, and you're going to really find out who wants to be there, because in some of our counties, let's look up in Allegheny, Ashe, Watauga County, some of those mountain counties, it's going to be brutal weather, and you're going to find out in a hurry who wants to be there and who doesn't.
Chris, one of the questions I had for you, because you're a recruiting expert and any chance I have to pick your brain, obviously, let's start with East Carolina. Can you talk about, since you have that great hat on, that purple and gold hat, since you have that purple hat on, can you talk about some of the commits from North Carolina that I guess so far we don't have anybody.
Don't have any.
Yeah,
right now, I think about it, but
I'm not as versed on some of the ECU guys as I probably should, but I am a huge fan of Mike Houston and that program, and have been for many years. Some of the guys that I went to high school and played with back in the day were tremendous players at ECU. Jeff Carr, I don't know how many of you guys remember him back in the mid-90s, late 90s, one of my dear friends. So, you know, I always pull for the Pirates, and I don't really know what to expect, who's going to fill some of those roles. But I will say this, you know, broadcasting the Shrine Bowl last year, and the quarterback coming up from Carolina Forest, the Garcia, Mason Garcia, one of the best quarterbacks I've seen coming up from a high school level. I think he's ready to play. Now, I don't think he's going to play day one because he got a pretty good one there right now. But I thought that Coach Houston getting him was a steal. When I saw him operate there in the practice fields and saw some of the other colleges looking at him, and I'm thinking, man, they think they really lost some of these bigger colleges, the South Carolinas to the NC States. I think they really lost a big-time player. And for Mike Houston to swoop him up, I think 2 or 3 years down the road, that's going to play huge dividends for him. And, you know, I just, you know, I looked at some film, and, you know, I had a chance to talk to Coach Houston back in the winter at the Eastern Coaches Association, and he kind of lamented that last year, as positive as it was, there was a lot of points left on the board and some wins that really could have happened. You know, I think back to that NC State game 1 of the season, that could have set the trajectory of the season so much better. And now another year into his program and everything in place, I just think that the ceiling's the limit, and I think that they're going to do really well.
Yeah, if you look at our verbal list right now, not one kid from North Carolina, getting kids from South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Virginia, all over the place except North Carolina. I mean, is it just a matter of making inroads with the staff, or, I mean, why do you think right now no verbals from in-state kids?
I think a little bit has to do with the fact that now a year and a half in with Mac Brown up at Carolina, and I know they go out after some of the different kids. I don't think that they're necessarily going after the same players, but I think you can see the effect to where the staff at UNC has almost sucked the air out of the state, and they have dominated the recruiting in the state. And I think that it's really caused Coach Doran over at NC State and Coach Clausen at Wake to really up their game. So I think that there's a lot of guys still in the mix that are looking at some different schools. Now, with that being said, I think that this whole COVID pandemic has thrown a curveball into all the recruiting, because you couldn't have a lot of the home visits, you couldn't have the campus visits, and I'm sure that that's got a lot to do with the recruiting status. But I think before it's said and done, I think they're going to be fine. I know the coach has a great a group of players in areas that he's recruited from in Virginia and even down into South Carolina and Florida that he's done well with. So I think that ultimately it's going to be fine because, again, I think that Mike Houston is one of these guys that's going to be a big timer sooner than later. And I'm not worried right now if I'm a fan of the Pirates.
And Chris, I wanted to ask you as far as that very thing. When you look at when you're talking about the recruiting trail, you only have I think this class is going to, Bubba said, and Kyle, 15, and we have 10 out of 15, I believe. So we only have like 5 more to begin with. One of the things that Coach said, I know, is the very fact they're talking. I want to get your thoughts if you've heard anything. They're talking about doing away this year with the early signing period and just going back to which I wish they would do anyway. I know Kyle and I love that, is that you have something to look forward to as a college football fan. And I think it took away from the excitement. Yes, you get the early commits, but I hope that they do that and just have this year the normal signing day in February.
I understand the early signing period, and I don't necessarily dislike it, but being an old school guy like I am, old being the key word, I do like that National Signing Day always in February, because it did give you that anticipation, and the shows on ESPN or whatever network it is, when you've got nothing but recruiting and signing days all day long. I think that's an anticipated day, and I think that with it being on that one day, you could see us coach, like Mike Houston, or back in the days, you'd have us coach go and steal a recruit from another school on that last day. But when you've kind of got it in a period, I think that it's less likely for that to happen. So I would like to see it go to, maybe especially for this year, given the circumstances, have that National Signing Day back in February like it had been.
As far as that very thing goes with you were talking about the different schools in the state. What about the likes of Charlotte, Appalachian State? I know we're unique. Our population's growing. We have 7 D1s. There's some, the Alabamas of the world. There's some states that don't have that many D1 schools. We have 7. What about some of the other schools? Are you seeing that they're doing a good job? Or I know we didn't mention another triangle school in Duke of the Blue Devils with Coach Cutcliffe that I like a lot. What about these other schools?
I certainly think that Charlotte and Appalachian has probably affected some of the Pirates recruiting, because I think that they've really upped their game. I think Charlotte's a program on the rise, and I give Charlotte 10 or 15 years, and I think they're very much the level of a typical ACC school. I don't know that I'd say they're top 25 type of program year in and year out, but I think that given the pipeline and the talent and the resources and just the size of that school, and I know the financial backings, I think they can get there. Appalachian, obviously, you look at the success that they've had. I think that they have done a great job, and you see some of the commits that they've gotten. And Appalachian, moving up to the FBS ranks, and I think they're undefeated in bowls, and they're competing, and they're playing really good competition and holding their own. So I think that they're only going to get better. And I do think that even though they're on the far west side and you got Greenville here on the other end of the state, I think that will have an effect in recruiting. And, you look up in the triangle, you got Duke, and, I love Coach Dave Cutcliffe to death, but, for the most part, them and to a great extent Wake Forest, they don't typically recruit our state as well as I wish they would. You look at their rosters so often, and you've got guys either from the extreme northeast, the Delawares, the Marylands, the New Jerseys, the New Yorks, or you got them down in Florida, but you just don't have enough homegrown talent in there. And I understand it's a different academic requirement for both of those schools, private institutions and so on. So I get that, because they both seem to be a little bit more Northeastern schools than ACC schools. So I don't see them really tearing up the recruiting here in state as much as I'd like to see them. But they're still going to get a few guys here and there. But state, I mentioned NC State and Coach Dave Dorn. I really think that he's done a great job. But one thing that I'll say this about NC State comparative to North Carolina specifically is that, they don't get the big recruits all the time. I think North Carolina kills them in the talent that the acquisition of 4, 5-star, 3-star guys. But Coach Dorn and that staff have been great developers of talent. And, they pick a lot of these guys that maybe were kind of those tweeners of a 1, 2, 3-star kind of guy. And before you know it, they're legit pro prospects. I mean, heck, all you got to do, you've got several big time quarterbacks and some DNs from NC State playing in the league right now. So I think they do a really good job of developing their talent.
Bubba, did you have a question? I know Bubba's maybe multitasking. I wanted to ask, as far as East Carolina, you were talking about Mac Brown early in the interview with talking about the best talent he's seen ever since he's been in North Carolina previously and now. Next year, with next year's class, do you see guys coming to Greenville, top guys or more guys? I'm hoping that we only have 5 left, like I believe. We don't really have maybe a guy or two maybe to commit from North Carolina. But what about next year's class?
Well, I know the 21 class right now on paper, at least for North Carolina, is one of the best. And I think they're trying to elevate themselves to a different kind of recruit. So I don't think it's going to necessarily affect East Carolina's recruiting. But I do think that ECU, again, I think that they are on the uptick. And I just think that they are continuously getting better. I mean, it might be gradually, but I see a continuous process for them getting better recruits. I know it right now. It don't look like it with the North Carolina commits, but I'm not concerned again at this moment, even for someone who I try to be unbiased and not a fan of anybody. But I do pull for the Pirates. But with this, and this is one thing that you mentioned, Mac Brown, that he told me yesterday, is the population has exploded in this state. And I think Charlotte yesterday, some new figures came out population wise, and they surpassed San Francisco for the 15th largest city in the country. And you see the Raleigh-Durham area right there knocking on the door as well. And you see all these studies, greatest cities to live in, and you see Raleigh a lot of times, and even some of the other smaller towns. So I think the population is only getting bigger. High school football is continuing to get better. You've got so many better coaches in high school now compared to how it is. So I think that you're only going to get more and more recruits. Now, the one thing, and Mac even mentioned this, and this has been my big sticking point, that I'm always blasting any college coach I can. I mean, I hate to blast them, but, there's that whole little saying that college coaches, with the exception of ECU, they don't like to cross east of I-95. And there's so many guys out there that have been left holding the bag with no recruit, with no scholarship recruits wise. And Mac Brown mentioned it to me yesterday. He said, in a lot of instances, there's more speed and more talent in Eastern North Carolina, but you got to find them.
Tell Mac to stay away. We don't want to meet that.
But you look at Wallace Rose Hill and Clinton and Southwest Onslow. There's plenty of talent, and even right here in Greenville, there's some guys coming out of Rose next year that are going to step it up. I think Rose is going to be a top 10, 15 program in 3A this year. So I think it's going to start shaking things up recruiting wise.
Yeah, Chris, I agree with you as far as the recruiting scene in North Carolina right now. Obviously, East Carolina's been down for years since Coach Ruff was let go, and have won 13 games in 4 seasons. But I do think we're on the way up under Coach Houston. But he and our staff have to obviously get players from wherever they can get them right now. And I think as more success is had, that we'll get our share from North Carolina. But right now, I totally agree with you as far as it kind of being the perfect storm with the lack of East Carolina success and Mac Brown, and his staff being very good recruiters.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I was a huge Ruff and McNeil fan, and I was just texting with Harold Robinson, the great Harold Robinson, out of Eastern North Carolina, just a few moments ago, and he's dying for some work to do. He'd rather be coaching or doing something as I would, and he and I have often mentioned, that program that Ruffin had built, and heck, I was trying to position myself to work with him. I was down here trying to help Harold any chance I could, and for them to pull the rug out from under him, it just set that program back a decade. And for somebody that likes the purple and gold, that's certainly it was a tough pill to swallow.
Good old Jeffrey Comfort.
And that's that very fact, Chris, with one of the things, not to get too inside baseball, but the very fact that we're cutting sports financially. We've got towers that we've got to worry about paying for, and a whole bunch of debt, and it's on and on and on. But certainly with I think one thing that will help is when we can get fans, whenever that is, fans back in the stands at Dowdy Ficklin, and the fact that what you were talking about is right. I think Mike Houston is going to win sooner than later. I think that those guys. I mean, we're hearing at the practice reports and all the things we're doing right now, Chris. We're hearing a lot of good things. I'll tell you to watch out for. Is I'm a defensive guy. Watch out for Blake Harrell and the defense of East Carolina. It's going to be a lot better than what people expect.
I agree. I coached a high school game against Blake Harrell's teams back in the early 2000s. He used to be a high school coach in Western North Carolina. And I was scheduled to call on ESPN one of his games when he was at Kennesaw State this past year. But I agree. He is a heck of a coach. And I think that defense is really going to show some changes. So I'm excited to see that.
We look at the offensive side of the ball. We've talked about here. The offensive side of the ball is going to be fabulous, scoring a lot of points on that scoreboard. If the defense can be just a little bit better this year, they can be bowl eligible.
Yeah, no, I totally think that the Pirates are going to be right on that fringe. You know, I don't follow college football enough to say, hey, they're going to make a bowl. But I know football, and I know what I see. And the 2 or 3 times I've gotten down there to see games and practices, you can just see the culture of the program changing. And it might not be the recruits, and the recruits will catch up with the culture, but just the vibe of the program and the tangible differences that you can see in how they're interacting. I can gauge that trajectory just as well as I could looking at a metric of talent, and that's why I think they're going to be just fine.
And they're tackling at practice now, so that makes a difference.
Yeah, no substitute for hitting.
Yeah,
Chris, shifting gears, I'm back to the high school scene. One of the things that you're notorious for doing that is awesome around the state of North Carolina, you travel and you take pictures, video of the awesome facilities that a lot of our programs have around the state. So just talk about that and the way people can view that, or those videos and pictures, et cetera.
Well, you know, ironically, the first stadium that I had ever photoed that started the stadium project was D.H. Conley right here in Greenville. And then I followed that up with South Central and Rose because it was the summer of 2006. And we was passing through town heading down to New Bern for a little weekend vacation. And, you know, I just happened to see that sign for the high school. And I was like, you know what? For somebody who coached all these years and just loved high school football, I was like, man, I'm going to go just see the stadium just for whatever reason. I just want to go see what it looked like. And I happen to have a little digital camera that's about yay big in the car. And I'm like, well, what the heck? I took a couple pictures of it. I think back in those days, I might have had a MySpace page or something like that I posted them on. And for whatever reason, I got down to New Bern and I was like, you know what? I went over and saw the stadium over at New Bern High School. And I think I might have ended up at Kinston that day as well on the way home. And that's kind of how it grew. But it's something that's become a labor of love. I mean, it's an incredible opportunity to see all the stadiums across the state, go in and see the facilities. But it's also been an eye-opener. You know, it's really lets you see the fact that there are some true haves and some exceptional have-nots, and who has facilities and money and support, administrative support, booster support, and who doesn't. You know, the farther west you go, and, you know, I say a lot of it's got to do with geography and just the topography of the land that allows some stadiums to be built in some natural valleys and bowls. You got some incredible facilities up there. And then, you know, you've got some, and sadly, you know, I look at some of the ones up in like Halifax County and the northeastern part of the state where the school systems and the municipalities have failed the schools and just doesn't give them the money and the ability to have the nicer stuff. And you know, I hate it for those kids, but it's been great to see all these stadiums. I love it. It's probably been one of the coolest things I've done.
I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but what are some of the nicer ones you've seen in general, and then maybe recently when you were out and about this spring or summer?
Well, you know, I think the nicest, well, probably the best in the state of North Carolina is at Asheville Memorial Stadium. It sits in a natural bowl. You've got the beautiful high school that's over 100 years old overlooking the visitor side. Just seating itself, the stadium is seat about 15,000 people. You've got views in the mountains. So it's hard to ever vote against Asheville High School. Just down the road, you got Cherokee, and, you know, that's a little bit of a different it's not necessarily apples to apples because Cherokee is a federal school and they built that school with casino and tribal money. And that monstrosity of stadium and athletic facility there is second to none really in the entire country. It's beautiful and just so state of the art. It's incredible. One in my neck of the woods where I grew up in Kannapolis, Kannapolis Memorial Stadium. I heard you guys talking about Wrigley Field earlier. I kind of equate it to Wrigley Field in Chicago because you've got a row of houses along the backside of the stadium, and they always pack those houses and build platforms to watch the game. So I think that's really cool. This summer, I saw some really cool ones that I've always enjoyed. Trying to think of, some of the ones in the western part of the state, but even down here in eastern North Carolina, I love Legion Stadium there in Wallace at Wallace Rose Hill. I think it's now Jack Collie Field. But you don't have to have huge and elaborate and 10,000 seats to be a great stadium. Stadiums like that at Wallace, the crowd's right packed on top of you. And I always call that the Fenway Park in North Carolina stadiums because it's so old. It's got so much tradition. You got the old stone walls that used to be a baseball field kind of around the edge of the park. And I just think it's great when you've got fans on all corners of the football field just inches away from the sidelines.
You're definitely right about Kannapolis. The green Christmas lights and sometimes they shoot off fireworks over there when they score. It's a neat atmosphere.
Chris, one question I had.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to ask you about. I know that Bubba's more of the western part of the state, but the eastern part of the state. One question I had: do you think will powerhouses like, for example, Tarboro? Do you think that will affect them any as far as I hate to say layoff or I guess the delay in the season? Will it make any difference?
I don't think so with Tarboro. Jeff Craddock, I think, is one of the top 2 or 3 best coaches in this state. And he's got 2 coaches on that staff. Andy Harding comes to mind that could have been a head coach 10 years ago. He's got an incredibly deep staff. The continuity there, they've been there forever. They've known those young kids since they were grade school age because that's just what they do is teach those young guys, and they've got a system. And Tarboro, even for a 1A school, I know typically they have upwards of 80 and 90 guys in the program. There's 4A schools that don't have that many kids in the program. So I think Tarboro is going to be fun. I've seen the online Zoom classes and things that they've done just to keep their guys engaged. And I think Tarboro will be fun. I do think that there's going to be some drop-off with some programs, and there might be some others that do well. You had probably a couple hundred schools that had the opportunity to have some summer workouts this year, whereas other school systems didn't. And the overwhelming majority of coaches I talked to asking how those summer sessions went told me that the players were so out of shape it wasn't funny. And I do think that some of the schools that had an opportunity to do anything and just have the guys active will have a little bit of an advantage. But here's the other side of it. Coming following basketball, which is so crazy to think of with high school football, you're going to have a lot of guys that are already going to kind of have their legs under them that's going to have a season of basketball on them that will help them a little bit in conditioning. But I think that, basketball strength and conditioning and football is a completely different animal.
One other question I had as far as 1A schools and obviously my alma mater, which is now Riverside High School, has been for some time. What about the one concern I have, and being you're a high school expert, what about my friend Phil Willard's AD? I bet he's scratching his head and pulling his hair out because they're trying so hard to keep those programs going. We have a rich tradition of a whole bunch of fielding, a whole bunch of sports. You could potentially have a guy playing 2 or 3 sports, I would think, during that particular time of coming off of, basketball. You normally play baseball, but yet, oh, by the way, there's football too.
Yeah, and I do think you're going to have guys playing all the sports. And I had Q Tucker on last night with us on our show talking preps in Charlotte, and she mentioned that, there is not going to be any rule that says you can't play more than one sport even in the same season, because I know there's been some question among coaches like lacrosse and football bleeding over one another, and there's going to be some players that play both. And Q said last night, why can't they play both? I mean, it might cause you as an athletic director to do some scheduling to allow a game at different times to make sure that it accommodates some of your athletes like that. But I think, here's the thing, I think these guys, and I remember when I was that age, yeah, there might be a level of burnout, but if you're doing different sports at different times, a completely different athletic movement and a body movement, I think they'll be fine because they're going to compensate and they're in so much better shape than me. If it was me, I don't think I could play more than 2 games a week right now. We're talking church softball or something like that because I'm getting old. But these guys right here, they'll be able to handle it.
Chris, earlier you kind of alluded to it when you were talking about the way the schedule would look different in the spring, playing only 7 games and some of those premium non-conference and even out-of-state matchups going by the wayside. Just talk about, obviously there's too many teams to touch on, but just generally speaking, who are some of the top teams to keep an eye on this spring, assuming they don't lose too much talent?
We put out a preseason top 15, I think it was, with NC Preps, and it was in our preseason book a few months ago. But I think that you can just go ahead and erase those rankings. I think that they're meaningless right now because of some of the players that are going to move on. I still think that in the 4A ranks, and we'll start there, I think the overwhelmingly most talented team, that they're by far the best team. And without Power Eccles, and Huff High School's lost a couple guys, and, depending upon whether depending on what Myers Park's talent looks like, I think Richmond County might be the real winner in this. I think they could possibly win this 4A championship rolling away. Tremendous amount of talent. They got about 140, 150 guys in the program. Coach Brian Till's done a great job, staying in the 4A ranks. Obviously, you've got the big 3 or 4 headed monsters in Charlotte with these talented teams like Vance, who's the champions, and Myers Park and Huff. And then, oh, by the way, let's not forget about Mallard Creek. And although, they've got a coaching change, they're bringing down Kennedy Tinsley from Southeast Guilford. I think they're going to be fine. In fact, they could even be better. You never know. But there's always an unknown when you're dealing with a new head football coach. So those guys are going to be good in the 4A ranks. I do think that, East Forsyth, who's won back-to-back 4A championships in the small 4A, they stand to lose 4 or 5, maybe 6 guys that could potentially enroll early, and I think that would affect East Forsyth in the 3 and the small 4A ranks. But they still may have enough talent to win it all. But Greensboro Grimsley is going to kind of be right there knocking on their door. Nobody really in the eastern part of the state in the small 4A scares me. Scotland, a big Scotland, they'll be good. In Raleigh, you got a couple, 2 or 3 teams that are going to be really good. I think you're going to start to see a little bit of the passing of the baton of Wake Forest, possibly to Rolesville. I know Rolesville's got a lot of superb talent coming up, but I think Wake Forest, Reggie Lucas is one of the best coaches in the state, so they're going to kind of hold on to that. But I think that's going to be some great battles. Going down the ranks in 3A, you got, I mentioned earlier, you got Rose right here in Greenville that I think is going to be really good. Weddington, even losing Will Shipley and some players at Weddington, if Shipley decides to enroll early at Clemson, I think they're good enough to compete for a championship. But I'd say the one team, and I'll write this down, I thought Kings Mountain was the most talented team in 3A, but Charlotte Catholic, they could go after 4 in a row because they get a linebacker back from an ACL injury. They're in that same conference with Weddington, and if Weddington loses Will Shipley, I think Catholic's right there to maybe cash in on that. So that's a team in 3A. And, we saw them beat Southern Nash this past year. They lost a ton of graduation. They're going to be exceptionally good. They always are under Brian Foster, but I don't think they're quite on that level that they were last year.
As far as
Chris,
we have
a guy I was going to mention very quickly, Dave, as far as Greenville Rose is concerned, a dual sport athlete and a guy that's a tremendous baseball player as well, Michael Allen.
Yeah, I agree. And Rose, and I caught their game against Northeastern last year. I think it might have been about week 5 or 6. Rose on the hoof, getting off the activity bus, they look like one of the most athletic teams I've seen. And I love Dave Wotecki a lot. I thought he did some great things for Rose. But I think that, insert Caleb blanking on my name. Sorry about that, Coach. Coming up from Havelock. You look at that staff with some of those guys coming on board with them at Caleb King, by the way. I'm sorry. I know too many people. But you look at some of that talent at Rose and what they're doing here in the offseason, and I see the videos they put out every day. You can see the change in team strength. I think they're a team to reckon with. I think they're going to be really good.
One of our viewers, Johnny Gardner, is going to or he has a question for you. Put it on the screen here.
Yeah, Johnny, I think Southwest Edgecombe, they're always going to be good. I mean, always. And you're right. Getting over the hump, it seems to be an issue for them. And, sometimes I think it's not even of their making. Look at the playoff brackets the last couple of years. You end up getting teams like, I know North Davidson has come east, and Ledford, and some of these teams from the west that are exceptionally good that kept getting pushed further and further east in the playoff brackets. I know that's been a problem, them going and winning some of those games. But I don't know. I mean, Coach Cobb is a great guy. I mean, obviously the apple didn't fall too far from the tree with his father, Raymond Cobb, Jonathan Cobb, that is, in being a good football coach. And that speaks volumes, because I know some of these high-profile jobs contacted him because, they're so well thought of, trying to get him to come to their program. So I think Southwest Edgecombe, I think they got a chance to be really good. They're in that same county with Tarboro, so, they're always probably trying to fight for talent and always trying to win that big game there. But I think that they got a chance to be in the mix. I think I've got them somewhere around about the 17th best team in the 2A right now.
Chris, from a selfish standpoint, I have to ask about my Black Knights. Last year, slow start of the season, and then really came on strong, made a nice push in the playoffs. And talk about Brian Flynn's club.
Well, Brian's done a great job, and he's a dear friend of mine, and they're going to be really good. I've got both North Davidson and their new arch nemesis with Coach Mark Holcomb at Oak Grove. They are right there neck and neck to win that conference. North has got a lot of skill talent, great young quarterback that had come up from Lexington High School, and they probably have the best kicker in the nation, or at least one of them. So North Davidson's got a great program, and they're going to be in the mix, but I don't even think even between them and Oak Grove, I think, by the time they split the brackets off and you have the 2A and the 2AA, I think North Davidson will be up there in the 2AA, as will Oak Grove. But I still think the most talented team in that conference, and I still think that they have got a chance to be on a collision course with Shelby, is Salisbury. I think Salisbury is just tremendous this year. They went to the state championship game with a lot of sophomores and juniors last year. I don't even think that program has peaked. So I think that's the real team to look at in that conference.
North Davidson over the years has had some tremendous kickers over the last 2 decades. Going now, you have at NC State with Christopher Dunn.
Yeah, and I don't know what they've got in the water there. And my first job in coaching was down at South Rowan, and they put me in charge of the kickers because I was like the young guy on a 17-man staff, and we were playing North back there, and they always had tremendous kickers. And I don't know if it's something they got going on up there in Welcome or Arcadia or some of those little communities up there, but they're certainly breeding some kickers somewhere, because you're right, they've had some good ones.
And Chris, since Bubba's already been a homer, I guess it's okay for me to be a homer as far as my alma mater is concerned. What about Riverside High and Williamston, the Knights? Do you think, are they a playoff team? What do you think?
I think they are, and Coach Asim McGill, he's probably one of the best guys out there. He's starting to work his way up to being probably one of the most tenured coaches in Eastern North Carolina for sure. I remember him way back in the day as an assistant at Lee County, and gosh, we're probably going back about almost 18, 19 years ago now, and just in that, I don't have a list of the players that they've got in front of me, but I just know by looking at film that he had some fast, a lot of great speed there at Riverside. He had a beach kid, I think 2 or 3 years ago, big tall guy, tremendous athlete. I'm not sure exactly where he ended up, but I know that's a tough area to play. You got some competitive teams year in and year out. But I just don't think that a Asim McGill team is going to stay down for long. I think that they've got a chance to get back in there. And, it's always some influx of teams that are on the rise and some going down. I look at the coaching change. But I don't even think it's been announced yet up at Bertie. So, you don't know what's happening there. You don't know if players are going to be moving because there's not a coach there. And I think that they've got a chance to be okay. They've kind of seem to be around a 6-7 win team, it seems like, with a few spikes here and there. But I don't see them going down by any means.
And definitely they not only with Riverside, but obviously the team that I cover with a local radio station, Washington County. What do you think about them with the Panthers?
Have they made a coaching hire yet? I have not heard if they hired.
I haven't heard yet. I haven't heard. I'll have to check.
I do know, and I don't want to throw their rumors out, but I do know they interviewed a pretty big time assistant from Kings Mountain in the 3A rank. So that's a long way for a coach across the country with a young wife. But you'll see. I don't know what they're going to do, so I have no idea. But I go back to my days when they were at Plymouth. Bobby Cody is he's one of my best friends in the world, and he lived right beside the school, and he'd always talk about driving the lawnmower to school every day. You just didn't get a better guy than that. I don't know. I went to a game last year when they played Pamlico, and that was an incredible game. In fact, I saw the King Tut kid have one of the most ferocious hits I ever saw in that game. I don't know, with a coach leaving after just 1 year like that, I don't know about the continuity, but I do know that they've got plenty of talent. I mean, you got those young kids out there, and you got so much speed. And now that they've got some bigger lights out there and you can actually see the games on Friday nights, I think they can throw the ball a little bit more. I remember going to a game in Plymouth years ago, and I was amazed at how dimly lit the field was. But I was there at that game this year, and they had some great-looking kids. And to be, I mentioned Legion Field kind of being the Fenway Park of high school football. Foster Field right there in Plymouth, it's a great environment for football. I don't know if it's because of the way the baseball field used to be set up or whatever, but or just the level of football being played there. But I think they're going to be okay. I don't know. I don't know a lot talent-wise what they got, but I just know that that's a football community, and you got a lot of kids, and I know those fans expect to be good.
No doubt about it.
Chris, earlier we talked about your stadium project. One of the things when I was promoting this show, I was talking about how you and Dina King decided to join forces. So talk about that and the new product you guys have, or maybe the same product.
I think it's going to be better. But man, for 15 years or so, I got tired of banging my head up against the wall trying to compete against NC Preps. Such a fine product that was started really back in like 1991 with Arnold Solomon. So it was just an opportunity. It's so expensive and such just a drain on my resources to continue to run a site. And, you make money, but you really don't, because everything you make goes back into trying to make it better. And it was an opportunity to consolidate our resources, to work with her and the Rivals brand, and kind of have some of the resources that they already had available, and established message boards and different things like that. And I think that Dina and I have differing strengths. I'm so much being a coach. I'm so much better with coaches and bringing some community aspect to it. And when you talk about the recruiting game, I know a lot about recruiting. She's the queen of recruiting in this stage. There's not a player that don't fly under her radar because she knows who's coming and who's going. So I think that the uniqueness of what I was great at and what she was great at really works together well. And we talked about it. It's time for us to just stop being rivals and really try to do what's best for our state, because I think we both really love North Carolina more than anything, and we wanted to make sure that our state was the winner. So I think that's why we ended up doing what we did, and I'm anxious about it. And I think that it gives us a chance to be different, but I also think that we're going to have the same good product. But, it's just been so hard covering anything right now because you don't have anything to cover. So hopefully once the games come back and we can really show what we're capable of.
And Chris, I know you alluded to this on one of your Facebook StreamYard Productions here in the last several weeks, but just talk about in the way you and Dina talk about the number of miles that you guys put on a car.
I can't account for hers because I have no idea what she's done over the years, but I've worn out about 2 or 3 cars. In fact, I sold a 4Runner I had because I had back-to-back 4Runners, and just the gas guzzling nature of those had worn me out. But I bought a Toyota Prius about 2 years ago. In fact, it was 2 years ago, June. And I looked at the mileage this morning, and I bought it brand new. I've put 89,000 miles on the car in about 2 years. So it gives you an idea that I'm really burning it up in that car. But, I always said you can't cover high school football being at home. So you got to go out there and see the teams and see the schools and see the coaches and the players and the games. If you're going to even think you're going to know what you're talking about. And that's just what I do.
And you do it well. I want to give you a chance to plug this site, and obviously we want to have you back on in a month or two to get ready. It's hard to believe. Normally what we'd be talking about maybe conference play, but I guess it'll be weird to be saying preseason around Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it's going to be incredible. I'm anxious to it. I'm also anxious to hopefully see some private school games this fall. They're going to get some coverage like they've never had before, because you're going to have guys like me. If they truly play, I want to be at every game they play. So you got John Paul II down there in Greenville, and a Parrott Academy, and huge private schools in the Charlotte area and in the West. So I hope to get a chance to see some private school ball, and I might even go across the state line and see some South Carolina ball, because I just want to see it, and I'm anxious to be there. And if they're playing, we're going to be there.
Tell folks about your website.
Well, obviously, go visit us at NC Preps. Again, part of the Rivals Network. I think it's the best in the world when you come to recruiting in North and South Carolina. And obviously Dina also, in addition to her work with NC Preps, is also one of the contributors to the Tar Heel Illustrated site, which is also part of the Rivals Network. So she brings a lot of recruiting knowledge to it. And so, of course, by all means, check us out at NC Preps. And also, I have my own show that I'm a co-host on with the Charlotte Observer on Monday nights, Talking Preps. I got Langston Wertz and Dale Ross and Sam Griner and Jonathan Grice and Gary Richmond. That's a great little synergy between the 5 of us. So, we've got that going on as well. So, by all means, I'd appreciate anybody that wants to check us out, and we'll try to do a good job for you.
No doubt. We will appreciate you, my friend, and thanks for all the hard work you and Dina do. And definitely when we think about high school football, we think about you. And I texted before the show Coach Harold Robinson, because I knew you were coming on, and it was funny you were talking about texting him. And certainly we hope we can have you back on, like I said, probably sometime in the fall as we get ready for high school football. It's hard to say.
I'm looking at a message right here beside me, and you get me and Harold on here, and I heard you guys talking about Sonny, old Jay Sonhalter. I'm sure we'll have some fun between the 3 of us, so we'd love to do it.
We'll definitely do it. Appreciate you, buddy, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
All right, Chris Hughes there from North Carolina Preps. Appreciate him. And I tell you what, it's hard to believe with high school football knocking at the door like we normally have, but just the COVID world we live in. I was telling some friends last week, it's kind of like living in the twilight zone, especially if you're living during this crazy time, for sure. All right. Appreciate Chris Hughes so much. And obviously, Brian Bailey, a dear friend. We've known him I was a young broadcaster, 23 years old. And I tell that story all the time. Brian put up with me as a 23-year-old, getting started in the business and setting up all those live broadcasts. I still get now nervous in the fourth quarter, about 12 minutes, anxious, if you will, knowing that normally I used to leave the football game in my seat to cover the post game. I had to leave at the 12-minute mark. Want to give a shout out to our good friend Pirate Al. Talked to him earlier today on the phone. He's trying to help us out with some guests, and definitely going to have Pirate Al on Alan Powell very, very soon. You can listen to 50 Pirates in 50 days. We're going to keep that going. Obviously, with 50 great Pirates of the past and coaches and of the like as well. We appreciate it. We've got a lot of great programming coming up. Our next show will be Thursday night, and we'll have that on. Patrick Johnson's coming on, and we'll have a lot of great people on as well. Patrick does the show on 94.3 The Game, the P-Man from 5 until 6, the Drive Time show in Greenville. 94.3 The Game. You can have that tune in radio for sure. All right. Thanks so much for being a part of our show. And we'll see you next time on the Sports Objective. Thanks for watching and listening. Go Pirates. Good night, everybody.